All right, it says that I okay, all right, it says that I'm live now. Sorry for the 2-minute delay. I guess most people don't apologize for such a short delay, but here we are. Um, okay, I hope that everybody can see and hear me well enough. Excuse me, I'm still getting over the illness that I had very recently. If you joined me in the last live stream that I did, you can probably tell that I was coughing a lot, and so I'm still getting over that. So you'll probably hear me go and clear my throat several times today. If you are okay with that, please stay with us. So, I wanted to talk about social networking and social support on mental and physical health because I feel as if this is particularly relevant now when many of us should be social isolating ourselves due to this illness, this virus that's kind of circulating through the population because we don't really want to experience this illness uh, if at all possible. And oh, well, I'm glad, Steve Alvarez Blues, that you like this live stream. And at any point, if you have a question, just let me know. Or if you want to add a comment, of course, I'll try to my best to read what you have to say during the process here. So, when we talk about social support or just social support in general, what is it that we're exactly talking about? Because I think it's very important that we define our terms so that we actually know and understand what it all means. So, when we talk about support, the dictionary tends to define it as to keep from failing or giving way, give courage, confidence, or power of endurance to supply with necessities, lend assistance, or countenance to whatever problem we're having. But this is a very broad sense of just support generally. So, how do we add the social aspect of it? And I really feel that it's kind of strange to dissect these definitions or, I guess, push them apart from each other because I don't know how you would support something without it being social unless you use it the term as in like prop up something that's supporting it, but like there's the support beam, something like that, right? So when we talk about kind of social support, let's distinguish the concept from the broader definition again. In doing so, what we'll find is that social support always involves either the presence or implication of hopefully stable human relationships. And so that's the key, that these relationships must be stable. I don't know if anybody has kept up with what's going on around the world as far as this social isolating process, but a lot of people are finding themselves not only locked in homes, but kind of stuck at home with partners that are very abusive towards them. And then they have no means to talk to others to help, I guess, through this or to go somewhere. I think France has an a option here or has somewhat of a solution. They're putting women and men who find themselves in these types of relationships in hotel rooms and offer them to have on their own. Now, a lot of the times when we're talking about abusive relationships, we're talking about people that are very isolated already. So they're not only stuck at home, but now they're taking that abusive aspect. And then when we move them to another place, hopefully for their safety, of course, they're still by themselves completely because a lot of the time you'll find that relationships tend to break down under those circumstances, whether people just get fed up with the situation or if the partner is intentionally trying to separate them from others so that they maintain complete control over that person. So these people are particularly vulnerable during this time. And so obviously this would be not be applicable to what we mean by social support because this is the exact opposite of that. But also, we can't assume social support is actually available just because they have a partner at home or a friend at home, that just because of the fact that they may be in very toxic relationships. So when you're in very toxic relationships, you're not really going to find much support there. Uh, Sorry, I have a dog and I've got lipstick on and like the lip gloss part of the lipstick. And so, yeah, dog fur, sorry. Unnecessary diversion there. So I'm seeing some people talking in the chat here. I just see a lot of emojis going on. And hey, Mark, I'm glad you're here. I haven't talked to you in a while. I hope you're doing well. I know that we're in different parts of the country, of course, or the world possibly. And I don't know if you're in kind of a more urban area, but I am. And currently the outbreak is not really contained here. I do live in a very red state. And so they have been delayed, to say the least, as far as taking this with any level of seriousness. And I really can't understand that. I have a theory, but I'm not going to like go all conspiracy theory right now on you guys because you guys don't really want to hear that. Um, yes, I do. And I think even New York is having a huge problem. But I think they're really were trying to get on top of it, and I think they're doing honestly a way better job. They just happen to have a hell of a lot more people, and it kind of ended up being in that central location, essentially first, or at least second. We had some cases in California, Washington State, and then New York, and those were the first three states that were hit with this, and they were hit hard in some locations. Definitely Washington State in some areas, as well as New York. So I just want everybody to obviously try to keep themselves safe as possible. But I also want to mention regarding how we're separating from each other. And we're already kind of seeing a crisis occur around us because of this. And what the research suggests is that when we don't have a good support system, when we don't have a social network of some kind, we are more vulnerable to not only mental health issues, but also physical health issues. There, unfortunately, a lot of the studies that look at physical health don't really look at, the entirety of a general population or a sample from an entirety of a general population. It's not very representative. It tends to involve geriatric patients or older adults. So like people living in nursing homes and things like that. And they want to see like how well people are physically if they have or don't have a social network, which the findings do suggest that in these cases, they do not fare well. They tend to have more cases of like arthritis, heart condition issues, and just various other problems compared to the people that happen to have these social networks. Now, there's a caveat here that I'm sure some of you may note is that maybe having such issues, such as those physical things, does limit you already from developing social relationships because of the fact that you are suffering in some physical capacity. So think of populations that may be sick, may have chronic illness of some kind, and so maybe they have severe fatigue, for instance, and so they have to basically lie down a lot at home, and they don't really get the opportunity to socialize, even though they may want to. But it's kind of a self-feeding cycle, if you will, because you're not only sick, but you're not able to get to those social relationships that can essentially at least help you a little bit. So I just want to make sure that we do keep in mind that this relationship is there, but it's not exactly 100% true, or it could be the other direction to where it's the health condition that's preventing social relationships. And not the fact that the social relationships is causing, sorry about the mic, causing the health condition. Regarding mental health, people are more susceptible to mental illness when they are socially isolated. So think, your major illnesses such as major depression disorder, which is the big one. That's usually the one that tends to be studied because it is very common among the population. I'm going to so I don't know if this is a question for me, but Yolanas Nunn asks, how do you think that the homeless population will look after this crisis? How will it make it worse? And also, other question, did I see the cat thing from Inuyasha in your background before? Yes, that cat thing from Inuyasha was in my background. I had it on this thing, but now I've got Invader Zim instead. My cat is over on a place where you can't see him. I'm actually in the process of moving too, so it's kind of a wreck, and so I'm like scooting things out of the way so you don't have to see it, because I've got boxes and books and papers all over the place, and it's driving me crazy. But that's moving for you, right? And it's also difficult because my state finally issued a stay-at-home order that's enforceable by like criminalization essentially. And or at least I was concerned that I wasn't going to be able to move because I have already, said I needed to be out of this place by a certain date. And the stay-at-home order is set to expire exactly on that date. And so it's still kind of up in the air. So hopefully we'll get it figured out and I'll be able to move my things, although I still have to pack a lot of it still because I'm tired. My room looks like a therapist room. Well, that's what I treat it as. It's my domain. So I like it. But regarding the homeless population, as far as like how it will look after the crisis, it's really hard to tell. I think that obviously they'll be probably devastated by just the illness itself. But but with the homeless population, you'll see higher incidences of mental health disorders and really serious mental health disorders. So we're talking about not only major depression disorder, but maybe schizophrenia for something, or for an example. And so these people may have severe mental illnesses already, and then they get or are in a stressful situation where they could contract a very dangerous illness, and then also in turn not really get the help that they need in order to make it through this illness. As you can see, there's a lot of, I guess, celebrities 15 pounds in the last 3 days. So it's hit him particularly hard, comorbidity, if you will, going on. So I'm worried about this whole thing. It's insane that we have homeless people to begin with, considering how many empty houses we have at least in America or the United States. I'm not really sure if that's the same case outside of the U.S. And I read at least that there were some states or some at least cities that have decided suddenly that they are able to house the homeless in order to prevent the spread of this illness. So it's obviously there's obviously these resources that are obviously available. I don't understand why we don't utilize them and we don't, give the resources we have to our most vulnerable people. I think a lot of people think, at least if you deserve to be homeless, if you would just work harder, you wouldn't be in this situation. So we're going to hoard all of our resources because you have not earned them, and I don't want you to earn them, or I want you to earn them. But that doesn't really solve the problem, does it? I mean, that has been a thing for God knows how long, to basically penalize. You've got people in our society that really just want you to die. Um, They don't care about your life. They don't care if you. I'm very concerned about that as well. I think that this is kind of for those who don't understand how our society is structured. It's really opening up the curtain for a lot of people right now. And so people are seeing like, whoa, our society's a bit broken, isn't it? We're getting this illness, yet we're getting turned away from the hospital because I don't have health insurance. And I'm like, maybe I'm a teenager and I don't have health insurance. This was what happened to a 17-year-old boy in California. He was turned away from the hospital, and he had the virus, and he ended up dying. That didn't have to happen, did it? And that's what kind of irks me about this whole situation, is that for some of us, we've already seen behind the curtain and we've been screaming from the rooftop, yeah, something is wrong here. We need to fix it, and we have the resources to fix it. We can fix it. We live in a society, and so what does it mean to live in a society if you do not act like you live in a society? If you only act as if everything's individual responsibility, that in and of itself is not a society. That's anti-society, because society is there to help us, to help our vulnerable people. And it's sad. Yes, Michael Rohrabel. I hope I pronounced I know I didn't pronounce that right, and I apologize. So Michael here says, I live in Florida. The ultimate Florida man is our governor. When it comes to COVID-19, I'm afraid that you ain't seen nothing yet. And I think that's true. I think that's true for the vast majority of the US. I think we'll definitely see more tragedies, honestly. And so does social distancing actually work? Is it effective? And what are the long-term consequences that we're going to see from this, if not on our own physical health, but also on our own mental health? Now, there's two competing. Sorry, I got a cough. So I am still sick, so I apologize. So so there's two competing theories as far as what the effect is that's happening. Is having a social network only a mediating factor when a crisis occurs? And the argument under these circumstances is that human beings are always living in a state of crisis, essentially. And so yes, we're going to see an effect of benefits if you live in a social network, because it's mediating those crises if you have healthy social relationships to begin with. The other one is that the other competing theory is that we have all the time the help of society, and these will give us our social networks. These will always be beneficial to us, again, providing that they're healthy. And so I honestly don't think there's much of a difference here, because if we're always in a state of crisis, then it's kind of like, well, we're always needing the social help to help get us through those crises. Obviously, I mean, if you've ever been in a very serious crisis, gotta cough again. Sorry, I'm sure that I will get better and stop coughing at some point. I'm waiting to see when that happens. And so I don't really see the difference between those, because, well, I just don't. That's just my opinion, though. And I know that there's some researchers that are very serious about that. And I'm sorry that I'm not taking that as seriously as they probably would like, because I don't really see much of a difference. If there's always a benefit with having a social network or social support, then it doesn't really matter if you as a researcher have found that human beings are essentially always living in a state of crisis, whether they're small crises. Is that the right way to say that? Or major crises? Crises? Is that? I'm sorry, I don't know words well. Um, then it doesn't really matter because then it's either mediating the stress or it's preventing the depression or other mental health issues. And stress, as some of us may know, is very toxic to our 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 whole bodies essentially. Self can have very damaging effects. It may have damaging effects on the brain where it creates kind of a trap. So it'll affect brain areas and it may be irreversible over time if you're always under states of stress, stressful states. So I don't really believe that human beings always are in a state of crises because that would always mean that we are always stressed out and then we would be in that trap where the trap is that it the basically the chemical that we produce when we're stressed is toxic to some areas of the brain that involve moderating that stress. So if it's toxic to that area over time and damages that area, and then that area also was involved in helping mediate or moderate the stress, you no longer have that moderating factor, or at least it's not as effective. And so you've got a trap essentially where you're always going to continue to get those chemicals in that part of the brain, right? It's bad. But I just cannot find a way to justify that argument because the fact that not everybody has that effect. So not everybody has is stressed 100% of the time, whether there's small stressors or large stressors. So it's the plural is crisis or crises. So it's just crisis. That's fine. It's like deer. Nobody says deers, the animal. Okay, so Mark Caesar adds that they are saying that here in Australia, social distance. So what I understand about social distancing is that it doesn't necessarily prevent the spread of the illness over time, but it like in general, but it spaces it out to make it kind of a little bit longer, take longer to go through that population. The idea is to basically not overwhelm our healthcare systems. Because if all of us are getting sick all at the same time and we all go to the hospital, we all will not be taken care of. That is just how it is set up because there's not all the resources in all of the hospitals. It's very limited in nature. So that's what I understand about it. So it may make a lighter flu season, but it may also just kind of make the flu season a bit longer because it may still be circulating. It just may take some more time to get to various people. Okay, so Gregory Kong says crisis, excuse me, Gregory Kong says crisis is a noun. Crises is an adjective. Crisis is the plural of crises. Both mean the same thing. Okay, well, as long as I am under the impression, and I took linguistics when I was an undergraduate. And so what I came out understanding is that if people can understand the meaning of the intended meaning of what you're saying, you don't necessarily have to say it correctly. And maybe we shouldn't really focus on kind of the way in which we say it, but more about the meaning behind what we said. Because that is really the most important part of our communication is that we get across what we mean more so than, we say it perfectly. So Mark Anderson asks, we have limited resources in the richest country of the world. And so yeah, unfortunately, in these cases in the hospitals, they do because they've only ordered. This is a complicated issue and it'll take time to get through. So the hospitals and our healthcare system relies a lot on outsourcing. They purchase a lot of their products from maybe China, for instance. A lot of products from China, like the face masks, are made in China, and so they've ordered a certain amount that they think that they would need, but then this crisis pops up, right? And and then they have their ordered amount, but then our borders get shut down in regarding trade, especially with China. And so the hospitals and these medical facilities in the US are essentially unable to make another purchase because of the fact that they just can't purchase from abroad. Um, and the United States, because we did outsource so many jobs to so many other countries, we don't have the mechanisms in place to make these products that we need in order to basically save our lives, and that's why these resources are limited in nature. This is the same thing that's happening with pharmaceuticals too. A lot of pharmaceuticals that we rely on in the United States are made in places like China, and so we're going to potentially see a medication shortage as well as just like ventilator shortages and the face mask shortages. So we're kind of screwed a bit. And this kind of gives you an idea of not only how much we rely on the global community as a whole for something as basic as our healthcare, which I do believe should be a basic thing. But it also indicates that we're really not in a place to handle crises well, because we don't have these factories in place to manufacture these products that are needed. So it's unfortunate, but that's how it currently is right now, and that's why these particular resources are limited. So now that we understand that there's obvious benefits to having healthy social relationships in your lives, especially in times of crisis, and where your stress levels would increase, especially maybe there's an epidemic or a pandemic, right? And so what do you do when you're told to self-isolate? You know you get benefits from your friends and family members, but you can't really be with your friends and family members because of the fact that you do need to self-isolate. Now, I for one have been sick, and I don't know if I had COVID or not. I do believe that I do have it, and I finally got through it. I got sick early in March, and I'm just now getting better. And I'm still not at 100%. And also my dad lives in Florida, and stepmom, and they're moving back to my state, thank goodness, because I love my dad, and I haven't seen him in a long time, but I also know I can't see him because he's in his 60s, so he's a vulnerable population, and I don't want to give him whatever illness I have, and that kind of makes me sad. He's visiting the state, um, and I can't even see him. He doesn't come here that much. I understand that he's moving back, and hopefully, I'll be able to see him more. But I can't say hi even, and it's disappointing. Um, so so that's kind of again the motivation behind me just doing these live streams and talking about something like this or anything is because I think we need to realize that we can still have human interaction, hopefully healthy human interaction, to help get us through this very, very stressful time. we're seeing a huge amount of layoffs. I think there was something like, what did I read today? It was a very high percentage of unemployment. It was shockingly high, and that was only, like, the 1st of March or something. So it didn't even capture the, end of March, where we started seeing, like, vast amounts of layoffs. Jake Smith says, "Eat chicken soup. No chickens have tested positive for the coronavirus." I actually made some chicken soup today. I love some homemade chicken soup, and I have that waiting for me, and I'll probably eat some after I finish this stream. Excuse me. And so we're going through a very stressful time in our society. And I don't think, to be perfectly honest, that society is handling it very well. I think, again, this is giving us a glimpse as to how broken our system is, and how broken our society is. Because, you know, it's just alarming. It's alarming that we don't have things in place to help cushion people that get laid off under these really random circumstances. And it's random in the whole scheme of things, right? We haven't prepared for pandemics or epidemics, and as a global community, right? We just haven't. Some places are doing a hell of a lot better than others, but go and figure that heads of states, heads of nations tend to be really prideful and very resistant to following those models that other countries that have successfully contained the virus have done. And so they either want to ignore it or do it their own way. And unfortunately, the way in which they've gone about it has helped put us in the situation in which we find ourselves in today. Um, so that's unfortunate. Oh, cool. So Jonathan Hanachek says that dual wielding videos tonight, brief brain snacks and godless engineer. I don't know who godless engineer is, but I hope that you're able to do both and pay attention to both. I'm going through some comments here, so give me a second if you don't mind. Oh, so Aaron A says that 10 million unemployment claims this week/month. And it's something along those lines or something like that. And that is a hell of a lot of people. That's in the United States only. So in the United States, we have a population of over 300 million people. And so we've got 10 million of those 300 million are now find themselves unemployed and have requested unemployment checks, which is just pennies, basically. It can be in comparison to what you may have made before. How do you survive this? How do you survive this if you don't have the social networks around you that you used to rely on because you can't go see them? And I don't have those social networks myself. I am a pretty lone person. I like to self-isolate myself all the time. So I never really had a problem with self-isolating before. But the more, I guess, outgoing members maybe in the chat or viewers probably find themselves, basically hitting rock bottom a little bit or going into states of depression. I know that from personal experience, just being in one location a lot does have a strain on your mental health. It can make you a bit unstable. At least when I initially started kind of isolating myself more, that's where I found myself. And unfortunately, it was because of a medical condition that I have. I had to do that. So it was a pretty lonely place and a lonely experience as well. And so I hope that people are doing these things and doing these live streams to talk to each other, because I don't want people to have that experience. I don't want them to, you know, have to go to a place, a very dark place, all by themselves, at least, where, and we have a crisis on top of all of that, and a real serious crisis. You know how some people, they're like, oh my god, I have a crisis going on, I have all of these things to do, and it's kind of like, okay, well, I know you can get through that anyways, it's really not that important, I wouldn't consider something like that to be a crisis. Well, this is not the case. This is a very serious crisis with all the layoffs happening, in addition to the pandemic that we have. It's just a lot of stuff. And so Oreo asks, how's social distancing going? For me, it seems to be fine. Again, like I already was in social distancing, I guess. But the only thing that I don't like is that I can't see my mom or my dad, because my mom's kind of not the most stable person, but she's fun and happy to be around, even though she's kind of miserable all the time. But anyways, I don't want to get her sick because she's in her 60s, and of course, I never see my dad, and so that's the only thing that I think I have a problem with. But that's probably not going to have an effect on my mental or physical health too much, just because I already am there in life. um, so Gregory Kong mentions that I work taking care of geriatric patients in their homes and get paid crap with no insurance or benefits. I'm expendable. You're expendable in the structure in which we find ourselves. So, unfortunately, in capitalism, you're going to be expendable. A lot of people are expendable. I think my dad realized this because he went through a couple layoffs early on in his life. So he basically said, never make friends at work, because what happens when you get laid off? You no longer have those friends, essentially. You get disconnected from them because of that circumstance, and you can never expect to not get laid off, essentially, because of the fact that so many workers, all the workers, are expendable to that extent. But I don't think on a moralistic level, Gregory, that you are expendable. I think taking care of people, especially geriatric people, is such a value in our society that goes overlooked, because you are basically seen as expendable in this societal structure in which we live, because the geriatric people are considered expendable. I mean, they're no longer working, they're no longer contributing to society, which is this weird way to see contributions to society as the labor that you produce. Like, when did this get connected and why did it get connected? Somebody may be able to explain that to me, because that's also something that I don't understand. And if we can kind of disconnect those two, I think we can be in a better place as far as on moral grounds in a large scale society, because your contributions to society shouldn't just be the labor in which you produce. I think that is a very strange way to look at how you benefit or hurt society. Frustrated Atheist mentions that I'm a misanthropic. I'm a misanthropic introvert. I haven't heard misanthropic before, that word, introvert. So I thrive in isolation. Misanthropic. Of course I've heard of that word. Oh my God. It's one of those days, guys. It's one of those days. So yeah, a frustrated atheist, that's essentially where I find myself. I'm pretty much in the same condition. I it's weird because I don't like people, but I do like people. I don't want people to suffer. I don't want people broadly to be in pain and to suffer needlessly for that extent. Um, and in that way, I don't consider myself misanthropic. But as far as on an individual social level, I sure do. I think I've just been burned so many times with a lot of my social relationships that I just kind of gave up. Um, and I've been in that place for years now to where I haven't really tried again, to basically make friends. Um, I mean, it's hard for some people. It's definitely hard for me. I am the person that really nobody notices because I'm so quiet. I'm also extremely short, so I'm hidden all the time, and I don't really make myself seen, if that makes any sense. So I kind of gave up, and I hope that you, Gregory, you're not in that position. I really don't think it's a healthy position to be in for most people. I think that if you find yourself needing help, you will obviously be hurting in that arena. You won't have people to rely upon when those days or when those events take place. And so I guess this me streaming is kind of an outreach to all of you guys in hopes that we all right, and I'm back. So I got a notification saying that my connection was unstable and it was going to reconnect me. So that's why, if you still saw me, I stopped talking. Mark Anderson adds that I've been burned by a lot of people too. I feel you on that, Amanda. And so I'm probably talking to the choir when it comes to these things, or at least a lot of you. Um, Gregory Kong adds, I'm 6 feet and 300 pounds. Not being seen will be difficult. That's funny, especially when I wear bright colors. Yeah, so if you want to be seen, okay, so let me give you an example. That's happened relatively recently. Again, if you follow me on my Twitter account, you probably shouldn't because all I do is talk about politics a lot of the time and how angry I am all the time. So again, it's probably not the most healthy account to follow. But if you happen to follow my personal account on that platform, uh, I am very political in nature. And so recently, maybe in the last year, I was thinking that I was developing a friendship with somebody who had a YouTube channel. And, um, I appreciated their, want to get to know me better because they more or less reached out to me because they just liked my content. And so they started following me on my personal account and also obviously my the main account for the I guess the show. And I've never shied away from politics. I've never um, stated that I wasn't very political, but because of my political leanings or because I disagreed with them one time, they essentially just disconnected from me 100%. And I don't understand why. And that was very hurtful because I thought we were really getting along. I really thought that, we were, I don't know, it's very hurtful. And it's very hurtful when those things happen and you're not explained to as to why those things happen. And especially during this chaos too. We were in like a group chat together where it's like, oh, the four horse, like, what is the stupid a horse apocalypse thing? It was kind of like a funny thing to name the group chat, but we just felt like we were that, you know, like-minded to some extent, and we kind of agreed on a lot of issues. But then at some point, it's like they took a turn a little bit more towards the right, well, where I was always on the left. Yes, thank you, Maddie K, for Horsemen. So it was just hurtful. I don't know, and I have no explanation for why this happened. We didn't necessarily support the same candidate, and I had no problem with that. I generally don't have a problem if people don't support my preferred candidate because I know that they make their own decisions on their own. Now, if they want to have a discussion with me, if they want to understand why I support a particular candidate or why, you know, or engage in any type of thing, I'm going to assume that if you follow me on my social media accounts, that you will want to engage in some sort of political discussion because that is my account essentially. It is nothing more but a political my political opinions with maybe a sprinkle of like brain stuff, but very rarely. So I'm going to make the assumption that you want to engage in those talks with me. And so if I engage in a talk with you and have like a slight disagreement, we we may walk away from the conversation disagreeing, and that should be okay because that just happens. That's what happens with people. They have disagreements and then they can agree on other things that maybe aren't political. And I think that that is what happened with these particular people is that they weren't willing to engage in those discussions, and I had no idea that they weren't willing to engage in those discussions with me because they were so enthralled and you know attached to their particular candidate and their particular proposals over mine, which is dumb because I am not the candidate myself, right? And to basically disconnect like a friendship over something like that is petty to me. And then maybe that's indicative of, well, maybe they weren't going to be good friends to begin with, but at the same time, it's still pretty fucking hurtful. Let's see. I'm trying to read through some things. Yeah, I mean that's what I feel like. If you want to engage in a political discussion, frustrated atheist, I read your comment. It says, I follow your personal account and engage when I feel like it. I mean, that's exactly kind of what my expectations are on these platforms is you'll come and talk if you want to. I'm not gonna try to push you too hard. If I do, let me know and I'll back off. I don't have a problem with knowing those things. Um, Frustrated atheist goes on to say that Amanda is okay people. Okay, so Michael Durant adds that treat me like a human and I'll do the same. Seems like a pretty cool rule. Right. And this goes to a more kind of weird point that I think that I'm going to be like, well, playing devil's advocate. People define humanness so differently sometimes, don't they? That's why we have discrimination. That's why we have hate groups is because these people have dehumanized others that are human beings. And so defining human in that regard doesn't apply to certain individuals, which is unfortunate. Obviously, it's sad. So do you ever feel like, you're at a window, right? And you're kind of maybe shy, maybe you feel bad for this, like eavesdropping. You're kind of looking through the window and seeing all of these things about humanity, all of the mistakes that continue to be made, all of the circular conflicts, basically. Oh, we're in a war over the same damn thing again. Oh, we're fighting over the same damn thing again. Oh, we're doing this again. And you're just like, why is this happening? And also, why do I feel so detached from it? Because I'm involved in all of this just by being alive and being a human being right now, right? But I feel so detached, like, I'm looking in and unable to basically impact anything. And maybe I shouldn't even be looking in that window. Does that make sense to anybody? I don't know. I get things like that. Maddie K says, "I get you on feeling detached, but, like, I almost feel kind of guilty at the same time. Like, am I just meant to watch all of these things happen and not do a damn thing about it? Like, what is the power that I have?" Which makes me feel also just so small too and powerless at the same time if I can't even define the own power that I have. And if it's defined based off of something else, um, maybe that I have no control in, well, then it just, I don't know, it just drives me nuts to see all of these things happen again and again and again and again. And it makes no sense why we allow this to happen again and again and again and again. And it's the we broad sense, right? But as individuals, just look at how powerless you are, right? So who is the we in this that is making this continue over and over and over again? I would argue that it's people that have a lot of resources yet don't share those resources. So you've got billionaires, for instance, that know that there's homelessness in the United States. They know that these people are particularly vulnerable to this virus and spreading it to other populations too. I mean, it's not like they live in a vacuum. Some of them absolutely do, but not all of them. Some people who are homeless have full-time jobs, working 40 hours a week, and they just can't afford a home. So if they get sick because they live on the streets, and they go to work, they're going to spread it to other people as well as customers. And we still have the same problem. And it makes no sense why a lot of problems in society, they give like a penny, like a drop in the hat to them, to charities, maybe a few charities that, maybe it's clean water charities abroad and all of these things, which is great. That's great. But at the same time, what is enough? Because there's still all of these things that you have the power to influence. You have that power. I don't. I don't run the world. I have no money. I can't influence anybody. So if you have that power, why don't you use it? That's just something I just cannot understand. Um, so Michael Durant adds that I don't think billionaires view homeless folks as humans, as people. They view them on the same level as rats and roaches. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head exactly. And that's again, how do we define what is human and what isn't human? And how it matters. It does matter to society. Again, I have to say that if the people that you view as non-human and as roaches and rats are still members of your society, then can't we act like we live in a society and try to uplift them? It just like, what's the point of having a society to begin with if we cannot come together as and utilize the resources to basically help each other? Because that's just what societies do. Maybe I've missed the point of being social beings. Um, that's why we have that ability. That's why we have the ability to empathize with other people. It's not there because we never needed it. It's not there just because it just popped up. It just happened yeah, it just happened essentially, but it was beneficial for us. It was beneficial for our survival, and it's still beneficial for us in our survival to have this ability. But at some point, it's like how modern society is basically erasing that ability or that innate characteristic from us, to where those people, and I'm really concerned about this, those people who are less empathetic towards other beings are basically promoted to the top of the ranks and are doing better than anybody in our society often. And I'm concerned about that, because if that is the norm, which we have normalized it, how does that end up affecting other people? Of that, and where we are behaving less as if we have empathy towards others and are viewing people and dehumanizing them. And that's an important and, I guess, concerning aspect for me, because I understand that we developed some of these things on kind of because it helped our survival. And when does it stop helping our survival? Is society or is the structure that we built, this that we call society here, is that going to override the empathy that we have over time? Will people start being less empathetic over time? It's concerning if we make it over time, of course. If we make it, because global warming's a thing, right? And I'm really concerned about that. There's a lot of things to be concerned about. But I don't want to necessarily stress you out on this stream. I want to basically talk to you guys, and hopefully you guys can get some of your stress and frustration out if you'd like. Let's see. Okay, so Michael Duran adds that we don't think about our needs when they are met. When a person has that many resources, I think they forget about the cooperation necessary to exist in society. I think so too, but it's also like, how did they forget? My lashes are coming off. This one, see? So I'm going to take this one off too, so that, I look a little bit normal. So how did they forget the people that helped them? And how did they forget that they rely on their workers and their employees to enhance and increase their wealth? It just seems to me that it's nonsensical to forget those things, because not only is it your past, but it's also your present. And so it's right in front of you if you just opened your eyes, and yet you treat these people horrifically. And I'm specifically addressing like Walmart and McDonald's and Amazon. Like these are not, and meat processing companies or places. These specifically meat processing places, they are horrific to work in, and they are not safe, and they are dehumanizing in and of themselves. I mean, I read an instance of a employee who worked at Amazon in the United States who had to meet their essential quotas when it comes to, I guess, stocking the warehouse, or getting packages, that they elected to not go on to bathroom breaks because the lines were too long in the bathrooms. And so they basically used a bottle. Like, that's a dehumanizing thing. That's what we do in order to say that you are not worthy to even fucking have a goddamn toilet. So, which is, I think, something that's commonly available, or should be. So, how is it that we can do that? How is it that these billionaires do something like that and then are able to sleep at night? Is all I'm saying. I just don't understand it. Mm. But how do you teach? Oh, Michael Duran asks, but how do you quote unquote teach empathy? Mm, yeah, I don't know. That is a tough question. I don't really. Maybe I'll look into at least the psychological literature or psychology literature to see if anybody has made that attempt. Because I can't think of ways to teach empathy beyond teaching people to share. So, like it's from early on, you teach them to share, you teach them, the golden rule type of thing. You teach them basically that, you know, their knee, then maybe you say like teach, hey, we need the helper person to come and run and tell the teacher that, you know, band-aid. Um, because we all have these experiences, and yet some of us just don't. We see toxicity in extraneous relationships that kind of go further and further out from that individual. I'm not saying that we should. This virus spreading has indicated to me at any rate that we are absolutely all in this together, and so we need to. I know that people don't like the trade deals like NAFTA and TPP, understandably, but instead of saying and holding them accountable, and so we're saying no, we don't outsource jobs because we and then we want to take those jobs away from them. Well, now we're fighting for the same scraps as everyone else. And that makes no flipping sense to me when people who have the resources are the ones up top. And we should be fighting them for Pete's sake. Um, and so that's something that this epidemic, or I keep calling it an epidemic, but it's a pandemic. That this pandemic has at least shined a light upon. It's also shined a light upon um, not only how poor our healthcare system is, good God, but it's also shined a light upon the power that you may have as an individual worker too. Because before you know, what happens when people aren't able to work? Well, holy crap, does it mess up with the economy? And does it produce layoffs? Absolutely. As we've seen there's maybe about 10 million layoffs. Well, how do you utilize that to your advantage as workers to basically target the people up top? Well, I think the best way to do that is a general strike because the workers should not be in these conditions. I don't know. And I really doubt that we could because at the end of the day, there's just not enough people here that give a shit. You only benefit if I benefit, and so on and so forth. Then we need to figure out how we can get more power and the power that we do hold. And essentially, that is it. I mean, I'm coming to more and more coming to terms that voting is not the power that we have in the society in which we live. Democracy and capitalism are inherently against each other. They are just not compatible. And so capitalism is winning out over democracy, and it has been for years. And so what type of power do you have in a capitalist system? Well, very little. The only value you bring to the table under such a system is the labor that you produce. So if you stop producing that labor, the value that is gets taken away from whoever was benefiting from it. So that's why we need to do a general strike, because I'm tired of it's ridiculous, to say the least. And that's why we need to do a general strike. Um, because look how much power we have, and look what happens when everybody stops working or is unable to go into work. Well, it will outweigh the risks. Um, I don't know. Maybe I'm one of few voices that would advocate for such a thing. Aaron A says, it seems that if a society can all collectively become psychopaths to certain groups, it's possible to do the opposite with some kind of positive propaganda. I don't know what you're referring to, but I feel like if everybody was a psychopath, we still would all be competing with each other. And it may be even more so. So I don't, yeah, it seems I don't want to have a society of psychopaths. It's not a society in which I would thrive. I don't thrive in a society too because my value is nothing apparently. But but we aren't valueless. We are human beings. The fact that we have our governments asking the question if the economy is more important than human lives. Well, what is that? Good God, what does that mean? It means that capitalism won over anything else. And why did it win? How do we win something that people are willing to entertain and even admit that that is what they're entertaining as far as like heads of state? Absolutely ridiculous. And the biggest offenders of this are also the people that are pro-life, the pro-lifers that go, life is valuable, babies' lives is valuable, but at the same time, the economy is more important than life. So what is it? There's too many. How do you resolve that in your brain? I can't resolve such a thing, which is why I don't think that way. But I just can't resolve it. And I think it's a terrible way to look at these things. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm reading through comments. The chat slowed down a bit. Gregory Kong says charities are like churches for millionaires and billionaires. Dump a little chump change and get a better return than what you lost. Absolutely. They always, if they are, the thing about these people is to that particular charity, they will not donate to that particular charity. And so in some way they are benefiting, period. And they have already calculated that what they put into that charity is less than the benefits that they'll gain from doing so. So that is something that we all need to be aware of. So when anybody's Jake Smith adds, I would love to see pro-abortion rights advocates address poverty. They never seem to do. Poverty is two-thirds of all abortions. I don't really know the rate of being in poverty and having an abortion. I know that at least in the United States, abortion acts to because a lot of the time you can't afford it. It's very expensive. And so people do end up going through with the pregnancy, even though they live in poverty because of the fact that they couldn't initially afford this. And sometimes there's only one a clinic in an entire state. And if, say, you're impoverished and don't have a car, you have to take the bus to work and to and from work. How are you going to get across the state to go to this clinic to have a procedure done? That's also costly. I just don't think that that's true. You guys are okay with this, that I am going to sign off, and I have finished the kind of like the research information portion of my next video. I have written that portion of the next video, and this is kind of that all of you have joined me today, and I really hope that you stay safe, stay as healthy as possible, and don't get this horrible virus. And I hope that all of you do not lose your jobs and all of these things, because I'm really concerned about all of you a lot. And so, if anything rises, I hope we're all able to also take care of each other as best as we can. So have a great weekend, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys. Oh, yeah, and like, share, and subscribe. That's what, moderator said, so yeah, that too. Bye, guys.